Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mike Rosehart Show. Today's episode goes out to all the people doing the real estate grind. I see you, I appreciate you. I know how hard it can be. We're sold this dream in real estate that everything's passive and it's just, passive income. And it's nothing close to holding index funds. It's way more work. You've got bookkeeping, you've got general overhead management, you've got, you know, um, just miscellaneous tasks like insurance, account, utilities, things you can't actually outsource very easily, like setting up insurance on a property requires you to be on the phone. There's no other way around it. Site inspections and stuff are hard to outsource to property management. Even if you have really great property management, you have to manage them. They send you invoices, you discuss when things happen, you need repairs or whatever happens. There's always coordination that happens in real estate. And so today's episode goes out to those who are in the real estate grind. And especially right now, more than ever, for the first time in probably 15 years, at least in Ontario, real estate investors are losing money. And I mean big money. Like people are buying things for 500 and it's worth 400 after they're finished everything they've done to it because the market's fallen by more than the value they've increased it by. And so it's tumultuous, scary times. And so this one goes out to all you guys who are grinding. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Happy to answer them. It is a slog right now. It is a grind and rates are high. We're talking about 7-8% interest right now. It makes it very hard to cash flow. Most properties don't cash flow. If you're refinancing anytime soon, you're feeling the pain. If you're buying new properties, you're feeling the pain. There's definitely, it's more difficult now to make a profit in this business, and it is a business at the end of the day. And so this one goes out to all those people who are struggling right now. And I'm with you guys. I feel your pain. I also have lots of properties and lots of struggles, and I'm grinding through it too. And if it weren't for the people that I have assisting me, it would be near impossible. But even with the great people that I have assisting me, I too am with you grinding. And I too feel the pain of all of the admin work that goes along with owning property. And a lot of it is difficult to outsource. It really is. There's just managing a property manager is a lot of work. Even just if you have to fire a property manager and bring a new one on, you have to interview 3 property managers and onboard them. That's a job. If you have a large portfolio, that's a job. Every time you bring a property on, there's a whole bunch of work going with that. If you have partners, there's calls and texts and sharing of information back and forth. There's a lot of work that goes into a real estate portfolio. And so I just wanted to share that for those who are struggling right now, because I'm getting a lot of DMs from people who are in the middle of a deal right now, and they're like, hey, I had this plan to buy this property for X dollars. Here was the ARV. It's come back, the appraisal's not as high, or it's come back, time to sell it, and like the value just isn't there anymore. My market's dropped 20%. What do you do? And it's like, that's shitty, because you put 20% down, which is what most people do, and your entire 20% is gone because of market fluctuation. We've gone through a depreciation cycle. Real estate is going down in price right now. You've lost your entire down payment. With a mortgage on there, you've lost everything. There is no equity, potentially. So what do? Well, if you bought smart, you bought cash flow positive properties. I hope you did. Lots of people reaching out didn't. They bought properties that don't cash flow, that don't make sense. Like $500,000 properties, they rent for $2,000 a month. It's like those numbers just don't work. And I feel for those people because they aren't cash flowing. They're losing money every month and they can't sell it because realtor fees, transaction fees, all of the friction that is required to get out of a deal is more than their equity in the deal, given the current values. And so they're in a tricky position. You're not alone. A lot of people are in the same position right now. And so, at the same time, I'm gonna give you some good news. That was the point of, I wanted to have a heart to heart with the guys who are doing this right now and are suffering. A silver lining is that it probably will get better in the next 2-3 years if you can hold on through these crazy times, because immigration in Ontario and in Canada is taking 1.5 million people a year, and they can't build anywhere near that. In fact, current data suggests that about 1/4 of all builds and developments are being canceled or paused right now. So they're building less because there's no profit. When interest rates are 8%, one of the major costs to build, people think it's labor, materials, those are important too, but the largest cost for a developer is their financing cost. They have to hold that land for potentially 2, 3, 4 years before it's developed, and then the builder has to hold it for 6 months to a year before it's fully sold to the client. And so there's a lot of burn through that period. And when it was 2% interest rate, okay, you can burn for 5 years, that's 10% total cost. But when it's 10% cost now, to burn that project for 5 years means it's a 50% interest cost, which means there's a huge amount of margin lost when rates are 200-300% higher than they were a year and a year ago. And it's going to result in a major pent-up demand boom when rates fall. So the pain we're going through now is going to result in insane rip-ups. I'm extremely optimistic for 2026. I think that the government is going to stay hard on rates. I think there's a good chance that we'll get another hike yet. I think they're going to stay hard for the rest of this year. They're going to put people in a lot of pain. I'm not going to talk about the stocks today. It's not my day for it. People have asked me to not share, so I'm not going to talk about that today. Fuck the NASDAQ. That's all I'm going to say about that. Fuck my shorts. There's a meme that comes up and it's Jerome Powell and he's like, fuck your puts, fuck your calls. He's dropping a hammer. It's funny. That's the meme that I referenced for today, because Friday to now we've had a 5% NASDAQ rally. The entire index is up 5%. It's a huge rally in such a short amount of time. So tomorrow's PCE. So we'll get core inflation. We'll find out what inflation looks like. And so I'm obviously a little bit bearish, but again, there's lots of people on both sides of this. I think that CNN seems to think it's about 51% are bullish, 49% are bearish. So it's a mixed bag right now. I don't know where things are going to go. What I do know is you build a business around real estate and you grind through, you can get a good positive ROI if you buy the right kinds of properties where you can put the effort in and get cash flow positive. Like if you can buy 1% real properties, you're so set. If you have 1% real properties, hold them right now. Do not sell them, guys. If you have a house in London, Ontario that's worth 500 grand, there's a duplex that can get $4,000 or $5,000 a month in rent. It's close to 1% rule. Hold that shit all day. You'll be fine. You get through this, and the next bull market, you'll sell that for 700. There's a huge amount of upside you're leaving behind by cashing out now. A lot of people are talking about where do you cash out. I think probably not the time to cash out. That said, as a random other aside, I'm going to be disposing of like 6 properties here in London area and a couple of the cottages that are within an hour's distance of London. It just, smaller deals don't make sense for me anymore in the same way that they did. So I'm no longer going to buy smaller deals. I'm going to try to avoid them where possible. I'm going to look just at bigger deals, do private lending, do the things that probably an educational course would make sense. Some sort of program to help you guys with this stuff. That's a good use of my time as well. Not only that, like I could do this for charity even, and it would be so cool. I'd actually find value in it, right? Whereas like just doing these small deals, you're dealing with all the same stuff you'd normally deal with in a big deal, but the returns are so small. So like I'll be dealing with a property manager, we'll be negotiating about stuff, there'll be maintenance, there'll be all these kinds of stuff, issues and stuff that can pop up, and you're gonna pay your utility bills and pay all the stuff that goes along with that. You gotta do your taxes and bookkeeping. All of that for one small property is almost the same amount of work for a 10x the size property. But the margin you gain is like $500 a month. And if my time is $500 an hour and I take one call from a property manager a month, I made nothing because my time's worth $500 and I took a call. So I keep doing low value shit that is a waste of my time, and I'm bogged down with all that stuff. And it's like, I just need to stop. Like, it's not use my time. So I've had a mindset shift that I can't be buying small deals anymore. Where I have a few people that I partner with here that are like the active partners, and I'm the more passive partner, where I can find a deal and I can pass it off to someone who's the active partner, who's on the deal, and their chief responsibilities are making everything work. Like, if there's a problem with the property manager, they direct with that. That I can work with. But where I'm in charge of that, even if I outsource it to staff don't care is the problem, right? Like your assistant doesn't care the same way you do. And so margins are tight, and it's just not worth the time, I think. If you're doing a big deal, it is worth it. If you get like a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, equity position inside of a, $2 million building, well, then there's a real upside. But if you put $300,000-$400,000 into a property, I don't know. I have some properties owning cash too right now, which is like stupid in some ways. I guess Dave Ramsey would be proud of me. He'd be like, "Good job, Mike Rosehart. Like you've reduced most of your debts, and I'm getting close to reducing. I have when this short finishes, I'm going to be cashing out another $2 million, and I have some loans out that are coming back as well, which will be tons more money that I can use to repay most of my debt." And it's like, I don't know. I like leverage, I really do. And I think if a deal is good, you should be able to apply leverage to it. And so I'm excited for the opportunity this winter to be applying leverage to my portfolio, but cheap leverage. Like I want to borrow from the banks at 6-7%. And that's the most expensive debt I would have. And if I can really quality properties, I think that's going to be a real opportunity. But right now it's hard to find places to park capital safely. Like there's a real risk when you buy property right now that it's going to decline a little bit further. How much more? I don't think we're gonna have a major depression. I think probably another 5 or 10% slide back is possible in prices, but we're getting closer to the bottom. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of, people are really just not, people aren't buying, just not buyers. And I'm noticing this everywhere. And people I'm talking to in many markets, there's just, the buyer pool is dried up because no one can qualify at 7%. $1 million house in Toronto, $2 million house in Toronto. Your mortgages, if you put 20% down, your mortgage is 1.6 million. At 6% interest, you're looking at like 6 figures in payments, minimum. You're talking like $10,000 a month to carry that. The average house in Toronto, who can afford $10,000 a month in mortgage payments alone? You'd have to be breaking like $30,000 a month to, after tax, have enough just to pay the mortgage and the expenses of that house. It just doesn't math. The math doesn't make sense. When the payments were $5,000, it was reasonable. Now they're $10,000 or more. It just doesn't make sense. The buyer pool is very, very small. So yeah, that's what I have to share. Let's go to the Q&A for a sec here. Hey, from Alberta. Hey, how you doing? What are the chances of Bank of Canada holding rates next week? I haven't looked at the data, to be honest. I haven't studied it deeply, but I would say there's a good probability that we see another hike. But the US GDP came in weak. Job reports we still have strong job growth. Wages are increasing currently for new openings faster than current inflation on average. However, food inflation is still higher. Shelter inflation is still way higher than wages, but wages are coming down. The amount of job openings is declining. That's what we got yesterday. And then today we got the ADP numbers as well, which also showing a softening in the jobs market. So that should push the Fed to drop rates sooner. So there is some new, more recent data that would suggest that the Fed could hold. And whatever the Fed does, Canada should follow suit, right? In Canada, we have a little bit higher inflation, so my money's on a hike. Another hike's gonna be painful, but my money's on another hike. Whether it happens, I don't know. How many more hikes after that, I don't know. Really, it's about how much longer they hold this next rate hike. They hold that for 2 months or they hold it for 6 months. It's a big difference, right? Every month that goes by, people are struggling. And it takes a while for it to set in, for people to realize like, holy shit, market's fucked. So yeah. My thoughts on that. David says, if you had to sell, how long should you wait? I'm not in a rush. I want to take my time. So David, if you do have to sell, sell now. It depends on your market, I guess, is the answer. So if you're in London, Ontario, our downtime is December. So December, January is the worst possible time you can sell, seasonally speaking. So if you have to sell a property here in London, Ontario, where it gets really snowy and horrible, and like everyone just doesn't want to do anything, I would say, if you can, try to sell before that. So rush to sell. Now, if you're in a market like, say, Florida, where their busy season is February, March, April, people are coming down, it's warm, they have all the snowbirds coming down, that's when you want to sell there. So the winter in Florida is actually time you want to be going to sell your properties. You don't want to be buying in Florida during hurricane season right now. This is the time to buy, not to sell. Right now, buy. So it's something to think about as well. Schools just gotten back into the US. They're all going back to school already. So if you were trying to catch the school buyer here in London, we haven't gone back to school yet, but they have in the US. They go back to school sooner. So the school rush is already over. People are all settled. The kids are going to school now. No one wants to move in Florida. So in Florida, it's not a good time to sell. In London, Ontario, now is a pretty decent time to sell. It would have been better to sell in April or May. We had a really big rip up, and now we've been consecutively every month going down in price, and inventory has been rising. So market is not looking good right now, but it could get much worse. So I would say, and I think it will get much worse into the December period in terms of like number of months of inventory and supply side is growing. So I would say if you have to sell something, liquidate quickly. And then if you can hold, that's the best situation. If you can hold for 2 years, hold. And you'll be able to sell for a much better price. You will not regret holding through this period. So if you can hold, you should. Boom, boom. Next question was, do you have an accounts receivable business card at Lowe's? Yes, I do. I have an LAR there. Or I guess they convert their programs to something else now, but it used to be called an LAR, accounts receivable program. And do you have any reno hacks? So tons of hacks, tons and tons. Just, there's always a better way to do something, and there's always a cheaper way to get the same thing done. Like, as an example, you could buy a 4x8 sheet of melamine, and you can cut it at the store for $1 a cut. You can go into Rona or Lowe's, and they'll cut them into 4 or 5 inch strips to make trim. And that costs you like 60% less per square foot. Or you can, if you're making shiplap, you're doing a shiplap fireplace or a shiplap wall, they'll sell shiplap for like $1 billion a square foot. You can go buy a 4x8 sheet and cut it into 4 or 5 inch strips, put a tuning between each one and create the shiplap effect for like 1/4 of the material cost. So there are lots of hacks like that using similar materials and saving a ton of money that I know of. And then there's just labor is like just finding guys who are cheaper. Maybe guys who aren't the best at their trade, but you can work with and get it done. So you might find like there's a variance. So like look at flooring installers. There are guys who will install floor who are actually decent at $60 cents a square foot. And there are guys who will install flooring at $4 a square foot, depending on the type of floor and whatever else. But like there's a huge range. And the $4 guys are probably better. But for a rental, the $1 a square foot guy is probably good enough. I mean, if you're gonna flip the property, you're gonna rent it. Tenants are gonna destroy their floors in 5 or 6 years anyway, so it doesn't really matter whether you pay $4 a square foot to install it or $1 to install it. That's something. Order wholesale for your actual materials, like your flooring. You can get, oftentimes I can find flooring for like $1 or $2 a square. You go to Home Depot, you're paying $325, $350 sometimes. Sometimes more if you go to a specialty flooring store. So it's like there's a huge range of what's the same look can cost you, right? It could be a $50,000 renovation or a $100,000 renovation. And it's hard sometimes to tell the difference between them because they look the same. And so there's a huge variance. And it's definitely a challenge to run your business more profitably. It takes more effort. The guys that are $25 an hour don't show up. They're not reliable. So your timelines get delayed and you've got to walk behind them and babysit them and to pay someone to clean up the site because they don't clean up after themselves. And the guy who's $80 an hour is super awesome and shows up every time he says he's going to, but he charges so much, he or she charges so much that by the end of the project, there's no profit because you went with the best contractors. Sometimes there's no profit at all. And so the job of a real estate investor is to arbitrage. So be the manager and put the time in, which is like if your time's really valuable, real estate on small deals isn't worth it. It's actually not a good dollars per hour. It's like 50 or $100 an hour. And it's like, that might be great. If you're right now making $30 an hour, you're like, Mike, like I would love to pick up a triplex and make $50 an hour as a side hustle and put my time in and make something. That's great. But like if you're a doctor making $500 an hour, you're a specialist, a surgeon or something that makes like crazy money per hour, you shouldn't be doing probably any small deals in real estate and you shouldn't be managing. It just isn't a good use of your time. So it just depends on where you are in your cycle of life. Harriet says, I'm thinking of borrowing a down payment for a house I'm buying from my margin account. Pay it off for the next 2 years. Is this a good idea? Does the bank care? So the way that works is you'll be able to take that, the way the bank would see it is you're taking your cash out of your investment portfolio and the remaining equity in your IBKR, your investor broker's account, would then be levered probably 2 or 3 to 1 to continue holding those same stocks. So really what you're doing is just taking your own cash out. So the bank won't hold it against you. There's no debt issues there at all. They don't see that as debt. So something to think about. Definitely, you can achieve holding those same stocks without it affecting things and paying it back. Totally, you can put the equity back into the interactive brokers. That isn't a bad strategy right now, actually, to be honest. I think that's a good strategy. Definitely. Be careful on the leverage. I will leave one point with you, Harriet. Be careful what stocks you're holding. So I'm assuming you're holding the S&P 500, a really balanced portfolio, and you have some hedges on your portfolio, and you're not going to borrow and max out your leverage. You're going to leave some room in case the market pulls back 10 or 15%. You're fine. So that would be my word of advice if you're going to follow that strategy. Make sure you got lots of room. Thoughts on Grand Prairie? I don't know anything about Grand Prairie. You said it's an oil and gas town, so I would say that long-term oil and gas might not do so well, but short-term I think that oil and gas will do well through this little inflation cycle we're going through. I'm still a little bit bullish on oil and gas. So I don't know. I don't like to invest in real estate markets that only have one thing going for them because you're stuck with like if we go through a bear market cycle in oil and gas, I mean, your real estate might drop significantly. You might not even be able to rent the properties out. So there's a lot of risk. And so the question is the return worth the risk? And that's the question you have to ask yourself. It's like, how resilient is that market? And if it's not very resilient, if it's like, Timmins, Ontario, or like you said, Grand Prairie, it might be you need a 14 cap for it to make sense to you because the risk is so high. So you need a higher cap rate to justify, your more risk. Hong Kong says, did you always take the highest deductible possible on your home insurances? Yes, always. Always 5,000. Tips on home insurance. So really for me, it's about liability protection. I want to have at least a $2 million liability. I want to be really covered for liability if something big happens. If something small happens, I'm never going to make a claim because the cost of my insurance goes up such that I lose on any claim I ever make. So I've had a fire before, I've had a flood before, I've had major tenant damage, and I've never made an insurance claim in my life. Never once in 11 years, hundreds of units, tons of problems, flooded basements, everything you can think of I've had happen. I had a kitchen catch on fire, we just ripped all the drywall out and did it ourselves. The insurance company wanted us to use a company that was charging $80,000 to remediate this kitchen. We remediated ourselves for 12 grand. So there was a 700% markup. We were required to use their restoration companies. And they do this on purpose. I have a friend who runs a construction company. He's like, man, we charge like triple, like a 300% markup as soon as insurance is involved. It's like, why? Well, it's just a good profit for us. We just do it because we can. It's like, that's messed up. So first off, insurance is shit. If you use it, you have to overpay. And then not only that, you have to pay your deductible. And not only that, your rates will go up after. Not only that, if you try to get more insurance later, it's a problem. Not only that, like the stress of going through it and they fight you on it and like it's a whole battle. It's oftentimes cheaper just to eat the loss. So I'm a big fan of self-insurance. I would take the premiums across all my properties and put them aside mentally. And it's like if something happens, I have a pool of capital that's sitting there that I can use. But if an emergency happens, like someone dies on the property, you have to have liability. So I'm a big fan of insurance for those black swan events, but otherwise I don't want to pay a premium. So my insurance rates are much lower because I asked for the very minimum coverages. All I care about is my major black swan events, like a house burns down to the ground, people die on the house, someone slips and falls. I want liability protection and I want the other stuff. For me, it's never been worth it going through insurance. Again, like insurance will charge $5,000 to fix something. I have to use approved contractors. They again will charge me $5 grand, or I can get my handyman to do it for $500. And it's like at the end of the day, the stress of fighting with them for $5 grand and a little bit of flood damage, I can rip all the floors out and redo them for $5 grand. Like nothing is major, right, with insurance. And then when it is major, they never want to cover it anyway. But yeah, so for me, it's just never been worth it to make a claim up until now. Yeah, I get to stay on claims free. They love that. They give me a little bit better discount. And I even say to my broker, like, I'll probably never make a claim in my life, but knock on wood, if something ever happens, I mean, it's there. We want to have insurance there for those worst case scenarios. But if it's small, we just absorb it because it's not worth the stress and the time to go through insurance in most cases. And the premium you're going to pay to the contractors because you have to use special contractors to remediate everything. You have to get assessments done. You have to bring in an insurance assessment guy. You have to then use their approved contractors and they have to invoice you. There's a whole process to submit all of that, right? It's a lot of work. And so anyway, it's there for emergencies. It's not there for little things, in my opinion. But everyone uses insurance differently and teach their own. When you go and shop insurance later and you go switch to another company because this company jacks your rates and you go to change to another company, they're going to ask you if you've had a claim before. So it's going to affect you even if you had a claims-free thing. That just means you're locked to that insurance provider. And they tend to increase the rates much more aggressively on those people who are locked in with that provider. So food for thought, guys. Insurance companies always win. It's a profitable business for the insurer. So I like to have my own little insurance company where I can. Obviously, I don't want to pay a big windfall, so I always get a nice liability policy for the big windfall black swans. I don't want to pay out like a huge policy, but if something small happens below 20, 30 grand, I would never go through insurance. Renting is now cheaper than buying, if that is true. Is it better to keep renting until rates start dropping? The thing you want to do, Gallardo, is you want to wait for that pivot point when the Fed we've all agreed that inflation is dead, back to 2%, and that rates are starting to come down. That's when you want to buy. Just the first rate drop, that's when you want to buy. And it's important, I think, to wait. If you can wait to that point and you can keep renting, you will win because every month that goes by, it's a lot cheaper to rent than it is to own in the major metropolitan cities right now. So you put that money aside, you have a little savings, so you can then buy when the pivot point happens. If you want to move to Arizona from Chicago, would it be a good idea to deploy money now and rent until I'm ready? I always say it's better to rent, to be honest, when you're first moving to a new city. Again, you don't know if you're going to stay there. There's a lot of transaction costs. So if you're not sure you're going to stay in that city, stay there for a while. Maybe rent something for 6 months to a year and see if you like it. Make sure it's a good fit. Because again, the cost to buy and sell, there's a lot of friction there. What do you think of the discount services that just skip real estate agent buying each offer? I've heard of those. I have never used that type of service before. It's kind of cool to be able to skip the lawyer too, I think you said. Just have a lawyer do everything. So yeah, I mean, the lawyer was going to charge you a couple grand anyway, but you can honestly, like, I bought a lot of properties without any service at all. Like, I'm a realtor, but like when I wasn't a realtor, I would buy properties all the time, just write up an agreement purchase and sale myself. We'd ink it up, we'd send it to the lawyer. The lawyer doesn't even write the offer, we write the offer. So the lawyer if you had the lawyer write the offer up, that'd be expensive, very expensive. It's cheaper to write your own offer yourself. And then once everything's all agreed upon and firm, then you send that off to the law firm to close the deal. Or if it's the US, they have title companies, you send it to the title company and they close it off. Grinder says, hey, Mike, hope you're well. Do you have properties in London, legal duplex, rental agreements, or do you not tell a city? So it depends on the type of property. I have properties that are fully legal, and there are times where it makes sense to do everything, above board. My thought has been this on having talked to a lot of friends in the City of London. I'll put it this way. More than half of all rental properties in the City of London do not have a rental license. I'll repeat that again. It is required. Every rental property in London, Ontario, under 4 units has to have a rental license. By the way, above 4 units, no rental licenses. They only make you go through all that annoying crap with the small properties. But anyway, of those that are rented out currently that are not primary residences, half of them don't have rental licenses. So I would say my portfolio was similar to that. Now, I have friends you probably know who are gurus and stuff in the space and have lots of properties in places that don't allow Airbnb, and they still have lots of Airbnbs. And I know people who have rental properties in places like London that don't have rental licenses, a lot of them that don't. And I would say my portfolio was probably half and half. Half my properties are rental licenses, half of them didn't. If I was asked to get one, I would go and apply for one. I wasn't going out and actively looking for that. Leases, talk about leases for a second. Leases for the most part protect the tenant, not the landlord. So I'm just going to leave that here. In Ontario specifically, you don't really want a lease. You would prefer the tenant to be month to month. They can actually break a lease whenever they want. So a tenant can sign a lease and then 2 months from now and be like, hey, I'm leaving. And there's like almost no recourse. They just leave. Bye. The tenant can do whatever they want, but the lease doesn't really protect the landlord at all. There are some things you could put in your lease that do protect the landlord. So I would recommend, on balance, to do a lease. For the most part, I would say get a lease signed. That's the right way to do it. But there is some power in having no lease and just doing like a month-to-month thing. I would say get a lease signed. It's better to do it that way, but it doesn't really offer a lot of protections for the landlord. Most of the protections are for the tenant, so it is what it is. There's an RTA that exists, Residential Tenancy Act. It's there to protect the tenants. It's brutal in Ontario, and I'll just leave it at that. It is hard. It's a hard business to operate in when the government is on the side of your tenant and your customer is always right, and your customer cannot pay and still be right. Welcome to Ontario landlording. Thanks, Will. Appreciate your comments. Just hope your QQQ shorts hit soon, man. Appreciate that, Will. Me too. Me too. Zach says, do you know if private lenders will lend money for the down payment so you can buy a property with zero down? I don't know hardly any private lenders that will do that, but maybe if the deal was really good. Like if you had a deal that was like 30% off appraised value, 40% off appraised value, there's probably a lender who would lend you all the purchase price, 100% of your purchase price. You put no money down. But it's more often than not, you get a bank mortgage and then you put a second mortgage on, or you get a promissory note or some sort of other financing that you borrow to make up the difference if you're short your down payment. There's also the 5% down thing too. That has a lot of fees associated with it. You pay a 4% upfront fee in Canada. In the US, you don't. In the US, it's much better. The fee is a monthly fee, your PMI. In Canada, it's an upfront fee. So if you refinance next week, you still pay 4% of the purchase price as a fee, which in like a $500,000 house is a $20,000 fee on purchase for the right to put 5% down. 20 grand gone like that. So that's brutal. Gone. Money gone. Joseph, I would say don't do as I do. Don't even try to trade the market. Buy the S&P 500. Buy a basket of companies across the whole world that have a little exposure to every single, like VTI, a world index. Expose yourself to a little bit of everything, a little bit of every sector, and don't look at it and let it grow. Trying to time the market is so difficult, and I've had such a hard time. Even when you're right, it's mentally exhausting. And I am so excited to no longer have to trade. That's what I'm going to leave it at. And the world's probably not going to end. It's probably going to all be fine. Inflation will probably get beat. Rates will probably bounce back next year. There's a very good probability that we have a really big AI bull run. And so be careful. There's a really big tail risk. Big tail risk. And I'm not going to be doom and gloom today. I'm trying to stay positive. Next question was, when you flipped, you hold for 1 year to avoid business income taxation. So Harriet, I'm a flipper inside of my corporation. So every flip that I do is business income inside of my corporation, and I prefer it that way. It's taxed at 13% on the first $500,000 in income here in Ontario. So flippers prefer to be taxed as flippers. This new flipping rule only hurts people who are amateur flippers flipping on their personal name. So, I mean, I'm already taxed at business income. It's not a capital gain for me. For most, I do have property, like I do have a portion of my portfolio that I do hold for a year or 2 or 3, and I get capital gains treatment on that. So it just depends on the specific property. But no, this new flipping rule in Ontario here, unaffected. Basically, the rule is that if you're in your personal name holding properties and you hold them less than 12 months, it's automatically treated at 55% tax. You don't get capital gains treatment on it. It's considered active business income, which is fine. Like, flips are active business, so there's a difference, right? Like, my primary residence is something separate than a flip, and my, let's say, a sixplex that I'm holding for 2 or 3 years, that's totally different than a flip. They're different things, and one is a business and one is less of a business. They're all businesses in a sense. Like, when I have a rental property that I'm designing for cash flow, and it's a multi-unit property, that the rental income on it is considered business income. Every dollar of rental income profit is taxed at the 55% tax bracket in your corporation or your personal name. That's how rental income is treated. Capital gains are half tax-free, so they're the preferred way to make money. But yes, a lot of flippers who are just like amateur flippers are affected by this. Is owning almost always better than renting because of appreciation or because of the principle of residence exemption? So it's, I guess, it depends on the market. There are markets where owning makes a lot more sense. I think in my market, I like owning because I like control. I like to be in control of my place. I don't want to be kicked out. I don't want to have a landlord tell me what to do, coming on my property and whatever, like all the stuff. I want my property, I want control. So for me, even if it was more expensive to rent, I would own. It's a luxury, I accept. I also buy smart. So all of my primary residences I've made profits on, for the most part. Yeah, they've all made profit. And so it's, the primary residence exemption is the second part of that question. The primary residence exemption allows you to sell a primary residence and all of the capital gain is tax-free. The debate is whether it kicks in after a year or 2 years, how long you have to live in the property for it to be tax-free. And I think it's around 2 years and you'd be okay. If you're doing one every 1 or 2 years, the CRA might not like that. So I would say be careful with it, but it is a powerful vehicle for sure. If you own a property over 10 or 20 years with a mortgage on it and it appreciates, 5% a year for 10 years, you're talking about a property being worth almost double by the end of that decade. And so if you bought a property for $1 million, it's now worth $2 million after a decade, you've got $1 million in gain that's tax-free, which negates any amount of extra cost it would have cost to own that property. Maintenance, insurance, all the extra depreciation costs of owning a property, all of that compared to renting is offset by the huge appreciation gain that you can get. Yes. So I think the primary residence exemption is a really powerful vehicle, especially if you're in the top marginal tax brackets. If you're in the lower marginal tax brackets, the primary residence isn't that powerful. If you make 50 grand a year, the primary residence exemption isn't that powerful. You make 250 grand a year, it's really powerful. So it's, the richer you are, the more powerful that primary residence exemption is. So I would say for most people, renting is probably the better way. But for the top quarter or top half at least, I would say that the primary residence exemption over a long period of time will beat out the renting and investing the difference, I think, because of the tax drag associated with investing using the renting strategy. So I would say owning is better than renting in most cases, unless you're poor or the bottom half of society, in which case renting is definitely better. Does that make sense? It's specific to each situation. It's hard to be like one is better than the other. To each person, it is different factors. Isn't US election year usually a big bull run? Might see a rally next year. True. Oftentimes, it's especially true when a sitting president wants to rerun again for another term. That it's especially true in those years that they want to have a rosy situation. Typically, they'll wait, and the first half might be a little rough, and the second half is usually more bullish, closer to the election, so people are in good spirits about them. We'll see. I think that I will have to, I've set a rule for myself that I'm not going to be shorting into next year unless things dramatically change. I'll be closing my shorts out this year. But I think this fall is going to be rough. I think there's going to be an opportunity this fall for me to exit my short, and that'll probably be the last time that I ever short. I may hedge in the future, but I will probably never actively short. I hope that I don't need to actively short again, because the mind space that it takes up and the mental strain, energy, and anguish that goes on with the thinking about those positions is detrimental to my health. So for my health, I no longer want to do it. Okay. Would you get a variable rate mortgage right now? No, I wouldn't. I would go a 1 or 2 year fix. I think a 2 year fix is great because you can auto renew 6 months early, no penalty. So a 2 year fix is really a 1.5 year fixed with no penalty to lock into a new term. And I think there's probably a good chance that it takes at least a year before rates start to dramatically fall. And the fixed stuff is at like 5 or 6 right now, and variables are like 7 for the most part. Like there's still enough of a spread that I think you'd win still. That won't be true at the moment of the first rate cut. We will definitely want to go and start going variable, but I don't think we're there yet. That said, I went with a 3 year fixed in my most recent purchase. One of the cottages we bought, I did a 3 year fixed, so I can renew it 2.5 years. My thought process on that in the summer was that I would guaranteed had that security to ride out, and it was like a 5.19% or something. It's like I would be able to ride out any pain for the next little while, and I thought that was probably a good call, but we'll see. We'll see. I have a lot of variable rate debt too. I have home equity lines of credits and stuff that are variable, so I'm pretty much evenly exposed, both fixed and variable. So I thought that was a fair way to do it to manage risk. Because right now I'm trying to manage risk. The chance of a blow up needs to be near 0 for me to feel comfortable to sleep at night. So that's why I paid off a bunch of mortgages that I had, I paid off any expensive debt. I had some flipping mortgages, paid those off too, because it's just like, I just don't want the risk right now. The risk of blow up is high, and you need to be able to hold all of your properties through this time. And I'm comfortable right now that I say that I can hold through this time and have no problems. The liquidity is there. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight and answering all the questions. I think it's better to sell vacant myself, to answer your question about, you asked whether it's better for fourplex, do you think it's better to sell rented or vacant? It depends. So I would say, I'd put in a listing that I can rent it for closing at XX top market rent, or it can be vacant. So I prefer vacant, it's easier to run showings through. Sometimes though, I've noticed that I rent out properties that were tricky to rent, where people don't believe I can get those rents. I used to have student rentals where people would be like, there's no way you're getting like $4,000 a month rent for the 6 bedroom. And it's like, yes, I am. And I go rent it for $4,000, and all of a sudden the buyers line up because it's leased out. They're like, wow, it's turnkey and making $4,000 a month rent, perfect. So it just depends. On some properties, if people don't think it's easy to rent out, it can be a value. If you place really good tenants, a top market rent is a value to have it rented. But if you place the wrong tenants that the buyers don't like and the rents aren't right and whatever, they walk through and it stinks like weed or something or smoke, that might deter a buyer. So the answer is it depends. As always, it depends. But where I can, I like to place my own tenants. So I look for vacant where I can. And yeah, that's everything for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. The secret to unlocking a wealthier you is to 3 levers and control your financial future. Spend less, earn more, and maximize returns in the difference. That's it, guys. And please just hit that thumbs up button. Give me a little like. If you're watching the replay, drop a comment. That would be cool. Tell the algorithm that you enjoyed it. When someone's done speaking, it's customary to clap. Instead of clapping, you hit that like button. That's what you do on YouTube. So, all right, guys. See you next week. Every Wednesday, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and at Mike Rosehart on Instagram and Facebook. Look for the blue check mark. Bye, guys. See you next week.